then an O and a 0. BCQFS.
An O and a 0.
That's the website that Pastor Bondo gave me for the beginning of your. I have to ask Troy though, what is the website you get this streamed on, or is that?
Well, there's a you can get it off the Grace homepage.
Well, you can.
It takes you then to YouTube, the Grace YouTube page.
Okay.
And then there's if there's streaming, there's a link that shows up.
Oh, that's pretty.
If it's not, it's just not there.
Yeah. Huh. Alrighty. Let's go to the technology, man. That's supposed to be what Pastor Bondo gave me as the YouTube channel directly into it, but that may be dated now because Troy said you can get it right off our homepage. Right, Troy?
Yeah.
Is that BLQFS?
BCQFS. A small C. My penmanship is just not that great.
All right.
Jacob, our side's better than your side.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There's still time. There's still time. People might come.
The rivalry has begun.
Yeah, Joe, I can see you on here.
Good. Good.
See him.
Good.
Yeah.
Hey, Ken. All right, so here we got it. And that would be under Learn and Grow, Troy?
Pardon?
Under Learn and Grow, Bible studies, do you think? What you're talking about?
No.
Or straight up from the main page of the website?
The main page of that website there, I forget what it's called.
Yeah, if you go to the bottom, there's a YouTube symbol, and you can just go directly to that.
Oh, YouTube symbol.
Yeah.
Cool.
And it'll go.
This is Gray's video. I gotta go back.
You can get to it from there. So it's right below that. This is Grace video.
It is.
Yeah.
So if I hit that, it'll come up, the YouTube video?
Yeah, so I don't know if your screen looks the same as what mine does, but so this is Grace. Go to the very bottom.
Oh, the bottom.
Yeah, right. There's like 4 symbols. For this
Oh
one.
yeah, I got that.
So hit the YouTube one, which is
Found it?
only to the right.
Oh, okay. And then, oh, yeah, there you are.
Yep.
And live now, so I could,
Yep, you could click that.
this is kind of an odd thing, it's like looking in a mirror or something, right? Only it's a little delayed. How about that? It's working. I'm watching us, so. That's weird. Okay.
So if you go to screen, I can infinity, right?
And it's a little delayed, so it's like Groundhog Day. You know, you just sort of start watching. Wait, we just said that. We just did that. Did you find it, Joe?
No, I did.
Okay. Did you get the Grace website?
Right.
Okay. Then scroll down way bottom of the main. Can you go back to the
Go back to the main thing.
Yeah, the main thing. Keep scrolling down. Yeah, hit that YouTube one. Yeah, on the right side. Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe one. There it is. It's live.
There it is.
There, yeah. Technology.
Jeff just wants to.
Okay. You need? So did he have a spiel, or was it a quick one-liner and just? Yeah. Pretty neat. Good for him. Good publicity for the Hunger Task Force, huh? Well, a little thinner tonight with the snow. I had a couple people email me. They're going to be out and about, but we can start. Hopefully they're streaming in or something like that. Glad you're here. You made it. Kind of weird, huh? This morning we had all that, oh, can't drive, you know, then all of a sudden I had to go out to the Senate headquarters today, and usually it's 14 minutes from my house, and it was like 35, you know, that's just going to expect that. But then by noon, the sun is out. This is an odd thing. Winter, January. But you're here, and
Friday, the high is supposed to be -1.
yeah, that'll be good, right? Saturday's going to be cold. The high of -1. But we talked on Monday that it would be single digits, going to be even lower. Saturday. Well, we got to warm. We'll be warm upstairs. Well, we're a little eager too, to be honest with you. So that'd be lots of fun. Okay, we have 3 little books, Obadiah, Joel, and Jonah, that we have a chance to chat about, if you'd like. And we have some fun introduction for 2 more that aren't huge, but that'll be great as we look at these fabulous messages from God through the prophets. So let's start with prayer. It is our distinct pleasure, Lord, in this winter season to find our way through snow or weather or what it may be together as we walk on this wonderful road, a roadmap into your heart, into your love, which is displayed clearly in your holy word. We honor you for being the God who speaks to us, and of course we're humbled that you would even do that, knowing our sinful condition, and yet you've promised your love and you've demonstrated it. On the pages of Scripture, we see it more and more. Help us to understand better your grand promises for your people of old and for us now and for all time. Amen. Hi, Judy.
Hello.
Great to see you. So we had some little books, and I had forgot to mention last time, and you perhaps did discover that in your notebook on pages, maybe I did mention it, it would be on pages 6 and 107. What I'm doing in each of these Old Testament lessons with these kinds of pages called places, people, and references is trying to track through each of these Old Testament preacher prophet books and identify names or places or perhaps even words and phrases that might be a bit of a head scratcher, and to assist you in reading, give you a little explanation on what these are. Like under Obadiah, when the word Teman comes up, well, that's a city. And in verse 19, I have reference to the Negev and the Philistines and Ephraim and so on. Some of these terms you'll know. Some of them you might want to, as you're reading, go, well, what's that? And that's what these pages are for. So if you had found that, it might have helped you. Having said that, what would you like to talk about tonight in these 3 books?
In Obadiah 6.
Obadiah 6. I gotta get my Bible.
Okay.
Joel, thank you very much. Obadiah. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah. I always have to do that in my head so I get to the right spot. In verse 6.
What is, it says, what are Esau's hidden treasures?
Oh. Esau had made its mark in the world as sort of the Pittsburgh of the Middle East. in fact, that's what Asian Geber is. There's the nation of Edom, and as I'm trying to, I don't know if I need to draw this on a map, but so they are south of the land, the Holy Land. Maybe in my map, do I have anything close? Yeah, there we are. Is it up on the map at all? On page 108, listed or not? No. I think ancient Elath, at the bottom of that map, 108.
Okay.
You see that? Is what came to be known as Ezion Geber, and I gotta think about that again. But they're that kind of position on the Red Sea. Maybe that other city of Ezion Geber that I'm mentioning might be farther, but this is like they were into mining. The nation of Edom and its terrain doesn't lend itself well to farming, but this is rough terrain and cliffs and rocks. And you know that picture we had, like a Petra, you know, that kind of stuff. But there was also, they could mine and come up with metals and precious metals. And so if you think of how, you know, Pittsburgh had been in America, you know, the smelting pot of, you know, whatever. Is that the word that was ever used for Pittsburgh? Who knows? But a lot of steel, right? Pittsburgh Steelers. And they would refine ore, and then, so that is part of the Edom's wealth. And they had that kind of, you know, for making what? You know, everything, implements to weaponry.
Sure. Okay.
And if you have a product like that, that becomes exportable, right? And then you're talking world trade and whatever else, so they could, that was a good question, actually. Because you get these phrases and you wonder, well, what in the world are treasures? You know, does that mean then you accumulate after some ransacking or some other, you know, warlike things, do you accumulate the wealth of other nations too? I'm sure that can be, that's what you'd pile in your treasury, I bet, don't you think? You know, some of their own personal accumulated in battle wealth, and then also part of their economy wealth.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting in our world today, right? In America, if you were, this is a kind of a weird question, but if you were an attacking nation and could bomb and destroy something, what would you aim at today? Tony, what would you aim at if you're going to bomb something in America today?
Communications towers.
The communication grid, wouldn't that be extremely disruptive?
Chloride plants.
Industry that sustains the people to keep them fighting.
Industry that sustains people. That was a big thing during World War II, you know, when the Germans were bombing Britain, and Britain turned around and then bombed all their railroad lines and their factories. I mean, it's mass destruction and stuff, but that would be, right? Their infrastructure for communication, right? And industry. What
For internet carriers.
Isn't that amazing? Did everybody hear that? 89% of the world's commerce.
It might be 82, somewhere in the 80s. Somewhere's in the 80s.
But you know, see, then you're disrupting the economy, right? You know, it's like the 9/11, right? That the destruction. I don't know if they figured that they would be able to burn and collapse towers, just run them in there and just whatever. But that actually disrupted, you know, the economy and shut down Wall Street. I mean, that there was a bounce back eventually, and somehow, you know. But boy, that when you disrupt the world and U.S. economy, I mean, it's scary to think about, you know, because we have at our church, he's retired just recently, young to my standards, 50s, but an FBI agent, you know, for 25 years, and he dealt with white collar and cybercrime. Because in the old days, you're thinking FBI, they're going to chase down bad guys with machine guns, or you know, they're going to go at, but it's a lot of cyber stuff nowadays, isn't that? I mean, really. So in those days but this makes me think about this, because Obadiah is a Bible book where God is saying, whatever is going to be happening in the world, I still have my fingers on. I'm still, because the Israelites are troubled by these distant cousins, the Edomites, who as a tiny little, but had accumulated strength and wealth, and were for centuries picking on the Israelites, or at least joining other nations in that picking on Israel. And even though the Israelites were unfaithful to God and didn't deserve it, the Lord is still saying, I'll take care of your enemies. Which, wow. And then it's a Bible book that makes you think, because he goes beyond the destruction of Edom then, and then tags on the last verses. Once you're, past verse, 15 there, you start thinking even more globally about other nations. But Obadiah is the center, Edom is the center of attention. And it's one of those hidden Bible books, because it's so little, we hardly ever talk about it. It probably will come up once in 3 years as a text as one of the pericopic readings, as something we'll hear in church. You don't hear sermons on that a lot, that kind of thing. Not like Isaiah, which has got, tons and tons of references that we'll have in the 3-year series of worship. But yet here it is in the Bible, and for a reason. Because I don't know about you, but there are times when I can admit that I probably am not paying attention like I should to what's going on globally. You just sort of get real safe and narrow-minded in your own little world and your own little family and church and things you do, but then when you start listening to the news, whether you like to listen and hear some global things and realize what's going on, so you get all the more thankful for Psalm 2 and for Obadiah. In Psalm 2, God is in the heavens, and the kings of the earth band together against the Lord. And again, we just referred to that executive committee meeting for our devotion, right, Jeff? But that, God is still, doesn't look like it all the time, but he's still in control, which is, I don't know about you, but that gets me awfully comforted, because my first reaction when you start thinking global stuff is, uh-oh. The bounce back on the other side, God being not only in control and the actual things that we can see. So you start listening, Obadiah, right? You start thinking in your mind, what are the trouble spots in the world that bother you? Right now, 2019, what are trouble spots in the world that if you hear about them, you have there's some concern out there?
Middle East, obviously.
Middle East, that's been around for several decades. We're worried about stuff going on there, right? North Korea. Can you think of other hot spots right now, Judy? That
I don't know if it's a hot spot in some people's news, but pedophilia.
Was that?
Pedophilia is really big.
The concept of pedophilia. Yeah, I'm talking about national. Well, thank you. Sure. The sinful stuff that's out there in children, and how about slave trade almost, or child human trafficking and stuff, right? But global hot spots. You named several.
Our own dysfunctional government worries me.
The southern border.
The southern border, right? I mean, it's in the news. It's talked about, right? But this is 2019. If you went back 50 years in the late 60s, there'd be a different list, wouldn't there? You'd be thinking about what?
Russia.
Cold War, Vietnam era, all that's right. And then you have to go back, another 50 years or whatever, and now 25 years, and then you're thinking World War II issues, right? Those of us who are on the older end of this, but not these young folks who are here, and we're glad you're here. But in our era, the Cold War was a big deal. Stalin to lead the USSR in its massive takeover, and then it was anti-Christian, and it was communist, and it was not that communism is necessarily in and of itself a sin, but the way it played out, it was threatening to world freedom and things like that. So then add in, from the end of the world, add in the threat of nuclear attack. That's what,
Civil defense drills.
Civil defense
Like
drills.
somehow crawling under your desk.
Yeah,
and was gonna
yeah.
see
So that
you
was what we
under
did
attack.
in grade school. Right, there you are in third grade. The teacher says, in case of a nuclear bomb, put your head under your desk.
That'll surely work.
You're gonna be ashes. I mean, it's just, put your head up
See,
your
that's
back.
why you never clean out your desk.
Right.
More protection.
You can have a little more padding, because those flip top desks, right, you got all the stuff in there.
This is an excuse to be,
That's right.
be a hoarder.
And then they had the black and yellow symbols on the wall that your gymnasium, would be a place for safety for the bomb fallout shelter, I mean, really. And then 20 years, I'm in college, and then after a while, it's embarrassing to admit, but this is, well, I have my draft card yet from the end of the Vietnam War, it was, 1971, it was still going on. And so we were not allowed in our dormitory when I was in college to have a television. You're not allowed. Until you were a senior. Now, who could afford it? These, of course, what were the TVs, if you had
Big tubes.
right, so my roommate had one, so we would occasionally watch, but hardly ever. It wasn't, there's nothing. So then what is it? How many years later, and married, and Ann and I went to the movies, and there was one that kind of attracted our attention, and it was quite a good movie too, The Killing Fields. And I think Sam Waterston, the guy who ended up on the Law and Order, I think he was the star, and it was about this Cambodian dude, who was, or Vietnamese, whatever, and he's captured, he escapes, and he gets out, and he ends up, after having met Sam and knowing him, and Waterston, he's been flown out in a helicopter. The Americans are leaving Vietnam, and this guy was, tortured and everything, and he escaped. And they met up again. Of course, and the movie ends, The Killing Fields, with all this Cambodian killing and the Khmer Rouge and all the slaughter that was going on among the interracial tension that was going on in that part of the world. April 1975 is the date. At the end of the movie, this all happened, and I looked at my wife, and I said, it was a month before I graduated from college. I had no idea what was going on. How embarrassing. We had no clue about global. I think it's a good thing for Christians to be alert what's going on in the globe, don't you? But then what's our attitude about it? Not, it's going on. God's got it, but, the concern, right? And then thanking God for his care and protection, and watching God operate. In my lifetime, that you would have said, that our wells, you saw this in the video on the Wells Connection, that we're actually invited by Hmong people to come, and the official communist government second in command came to our Synod headquarters and talked to President Schrader and said, yes, you can come to our country, and we would like you to do that. And we're establishing a theological seminary to train pastors in Hanoi. Really? That's just, or that, the wall would be down in Germany in such a way that there's access to Eastern Europe and Germany's reunited. And I've been there. It's mind-boggling. Or that we have Wells missions in Russia, in China, and it really is incredible. And Obadiah always makes me think about that stuff. Think about our world efforts. It's just really, really pretty cool. Well, that was kind of a segue into some fun there. What other things would you like to talk about, Nancy?
Well, going from what you said about Obadiah protecting Israel from their enemies, leaping into Jonah.
Leaping into Jonah, right?
Where the Ninevites are come to God. Okay.
Yeah.
But then, 20 years later, don't they cream Israel?
20 years later, they cream Israel. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Just what Jonah hoped would not happen. They would get stronger because God was on their side. Now, who's to say how long the repentance among the Ninevites lasted? I'd like to think that some of those thousands died as believers, and we'll see them in heaven. But what impact did that have on the whole global, scene and the entire empire of Assyria? It makes a dent, obviously, because God tells us here in the book of Jonah that these people were called on, even by the king, hey, get your act together, proclaim a fast, and let's pray to the true God. So I don't doubt that they didn't seriously become believers, but you're right. It didn't take long for the Assyrians, if we're talking about, what is this, 760-ish, or what do we usually say for Jonah?
Within 22 or
Yeah, within about
40 years.
40 years, they're smashing down the 10 northern tribes. That's right. That's right. But God still is using them for a purpose. That he would even want to save some Assyrians is astounding to me. And did, through Jonah. And then that he would use them as his tool to bring discipline. It's just amazing. Thanks. Yeah, that was other things that you came across.
So, not really a question. It's
Sure.
just- something I found really interesting was
Yeah.
Joel 3, verse 10.
Joel 3, verse 10. Tell us what you found interesting.
The wording is exactly opposite of Isaiah 2:4 and Micah 4:3.
Let's go there. Well, I know what you're talking about in Isaiah.
So in Joel, it's beat your plowshares and your swords and your pruning hooks and your spears. And the other two verses are beat your swords and your plowshares.
Right,
and
right.
Your spears and your pruning hooks. It's just the exact same words, but in a different direction. I just found it interesting.
I think that's, because God is rousing people in Joel, right? But actually look at the context here. To whom is he speaking, really? So in the beginning of chapter 3, in those days and at that time I'll restore the fortunes of Judah. I will gather all the nations. Now I'm going to call the nations on trial, God is saying, for the good of his people, because you're getting troubled by nations around you. You repent, which I want you Israelites to do. But now I'm going to speak as God on what I'm going to do about these nations who've been bothering you. I'll gather all the nations, bring them to the valley of decision, Jehoshaphat, and there I will enter into judgment against them, the nations, concerning my inheritance. For they scattered my people and divided my land. They cast lots for my people, traded boys for prostitutes, sold girls for wine, that they might drink. Now what have you against me, Tyre and Sidon, and all you regions of Philistia? Are you repaying me for something I've done? If you're paying me back, I will swiftly and speedily return on your own heads what you have done. For you took my silver and my gold and carried off my finest treasures to your temples. You sold the people of Judah and Jerusalem to the Greeks, that you might send them far from their homeland. See, I'm going to rouse them out of the places to which you sold them. I'm going to rouse my people. And I'll return on your own heads what you nations around here have done. I will sell your sons and daughters to the people of Judah, and they're going to sell them to the Sabaeans, a nation far away. So proclaim this among the nations. God is speaking to the heathen nations. And God is saying, I'm coming to get you. And that's why he then says, prepare for war, rouse the warriors, let all the fighting men draw near and attack. Beat your plowshares, you enemy nations, into sword. You're going to need them, because I'm coming against you. Come quickly, all you nations on every side, and assemble there. So go ahead and assemble. Try, you can take your farm implements, you can turn them into weaponry, you can have artillery, you can have the H-bomb, you can do all you want. Go ahead. I'm going to bring you all together. You can assemble on your own. Do everything you can to fight against me, and you're going to lose, is what God is saying here in Joel chapter 3, verse 12. Let the nations be roused. Let them advance into the valley of Jehoshaphat decision. For I will sit in to judge all the nations on every side. Swing the sickle. This is what happens on Judgment Day, right? And the harvest is ripe. Come trample the grapes. The winepress is full. The vats are overflow. So great is their wickedness. So you nations, you think you can do what you want to my people and scatter them and destroy and beat on them. Guess what? Now you go ahead and assemble. You better get your weapons ready. Because you just watch what I'm going to do when you're standing in front of me. I'm the judge. Try.
It's just interesting that what these nations did to Israel, Assyria especially, first of all, it was prophesied earlier
Yes.
by Isaiah that
Yes.
this would be done. I'm going to do this to you because of your unbelief. It made it sound like, I don't remember the exact quotes, but I will scatter you among the nations.
Yep.
And
God's word
God
to the Israelites.
takes
Yes.
credit for, I'm going to do this to you if you don't shape up.
Right.
Or you're going to lose your inheritance.
Right.
And then after it's done, he comes back and he rebukes the nations he used to do it.
To do it, and then he
You
says,
shouldn't have been so mean.
You should, right. Right, it really is interesting, because what is that? That's our God proclaiming law and gospel, right? You know, so he says to his people, I'm going to use the nations to scatter you, and he did. Then he's going to say to the nations, shame on you for, you know, which is gospel for his people. So I like the catch that you had there, Steve, that the imagery is flipped. So when he's speaking to these nations who had the arrogance, you know, this is kind of interesting, because it puts us as Bible readers like you're back in the beginning of Job. You know, what is it its deal that he's actually letting Satan pick on Job? Why, you know, that kind of thing? Well, there was some discipline God was bringing into Job's life. But it does say that God in his majesty can even use the devil as his, you know, he can use the Assyrians, but then he's still mad at the Assyrians, still mad at the devil. You know, isn't that interesting? I just, Kathy.
And in verse 6, it's not too often, I think, in the Old Testament that they refer to the Greeks.
Yeah, that doesn't happen very often, huh?
Is that just a translation thing to mean?
I didn't bring my Hebrew Bible. I what that actually says, because most often that's, you know, the nations is goyim, but I have to bring my Hebrew. But maybe at the break I'll grab it and we'll look at what that is, because you don't see that very often. Greeks, you know, that term used in the Old Testament. That's a good catch there. But are we okay with that conversation where we were going with that? Because Troy, you put your finger on it. So then, you know, from the law standpoint and threat to the nations is beat your farm implements into weapons. You aren't going to stand against me. Go ahead and try it, which is comforting to God's people. But then for God's people, you're not going to need weapons anymore, because I'm on your side, and you can take your weapons and beat them into plowshares, so you can change them into farm implements, because I'll protect. You know, that's it's just interesting imagery. Thanks for catching that. Isn't it? It's fascinating. And you found Micah and Isaiah have that?
Yeah,
Micah, we're going to talk about in Isaiah, not this week, but, you know, those two dudes go together. They're complementary. Their style is different, but a lot of their messages you'll find some parallels. Yeah.
How about Jonah and this whole vine thing at the end?
Jonah and the vine thing.
What is that all about?
What is
It's like Jonah got it, but he didn't, so you need another lesson yet on
Yeah.
who God is and what he's...
Yeah. Let's do that. Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah and the vine in chapter 4. Yeah, that's the first time you go through that or you haven't seen it for a while. It is a little weird. You know, it's just what is God doing here? You know. So let's go there, chapter 4, and it really, the stage is set at the beginning of chapter 4 that Jonah is upset, right? He's not happy with God, and it's just, you know, from our perspective, I don't know if you're smiling when you're reading this, but I start because Jonah, you putz, are you really serious? You know, so Jonah is greatly displeased and he prayed the Lord, "Oh Lord, is this not what I said when I was still at home? This is why I was so quick to flee to Tarshish. I knew you're gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, abounding in love, God who relents. Now, Lord, take away my life, for it's better for me." So I knew what would happen. These people that I'm preaching to, they would hear my message and they'd come to faith in you, and that would make them stronger against Israel. And that's why I didn't want to go. And sure enough, I did the preaching like, you know, after the fish puked and now I got out and did my thing. Now they came to faith. See? It did work, just like I thought. What is Jonah saying to you and to me by being mad at God? What is he really upset about, really?
The Word of God works.
The Word of God works. And when it works, what happens?
God shows his faith.
People come to faith. Even people that you don't like or hate. Wait. People not like you. People who are different from you. People you think are going to be enemies. You know, people that make you feel crummy and small. And, you know, do you want to wish them well? No, I want to have them suffer. I shouldn't say it, but I just rather have them. You're right? You know. But, you know, God wants them to go to heaven with Jesus and pray for your enemies. I don't want to do that, Lord. You know, I'm loving them. So this is Jonah. I don't want them to go to heaven. I got my own spot. The Israelite little hallway and corridor is just shh in heaven, because only the Israelites think they're the only ones here. Shh, don't talk any too loud. The Wells corridor, you know, right? They don't speak real too loudly because they think they're the only ones up here. So, you know, it's kind of condemning for when we think in our narrow minds. Jonah's book is a missionary book and teaching us about our witness life, our mission commitment, and our, really the people in Malawi are just as important in God's eyes as I am and you are. No, that's right. And, the street person who kind of disrupts our worship once in a while and comes in and makes it a little difficult, and then the ushers have to kind of usher because he's got some psych issues, I think, and whatever. But he's important too, It may be hard to communicate with him because he's not in a mindset or to be able to listen. But I mean, isn't it interesting? All these people, and Jonah was upset. I knew they'd come to faith, doggone it. So Lord replies, have you any right to be angry? So now he's going to teach him a lesson, and this is the thing. So Jonah went out and said, he's pouting, right? So he went out and sat east of the city, and there he made himself a shelter and sat in its shade and waited to see what would happen. Well, then the Lord provided a vine and made it grow up over Jonah to give shade for his head to ease his discomfort. A lot of people are thinking this guy's kind of a little bald on top maybe, and Jonah was very happy about the vine because it's got some shade. But at the dawn the next day, God provided a worm which chewed the vine, so it withered. Then the sun rose. When the sun rose, God provided a scorching east wind. The sun blazed on Jonah's head, so he grew faint. He wanted to die. It would be better for me to die than live. God said to Jonah, do you have a right to be angry about the vine? I do. I'm angry enough to die. This stupid vine, it was protecting me, and now it's gone, and I just, it's all about me. I want my way, and I want my comfort, and I want my decisions, and I want to go what I think is right. Because that's just the way it's only fair. So God switches it on him and says, you're worried about this stupid vine. You have been concerned about this vine, though you didn't tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. Who's in charge of this? But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people, can't tell their right from their left, and many cattle as well. Shouldn't I be concerned? You're concerned about the vine more than you are about the people who are going to burn in hell unless they believe in me. And you're worried about this stupid vine. Jonah, your priorities are a little bit. Your comfort, your ease, your life, you are more important than the salvation of the souls of other people. Really, Jonah? Really? That's the vine story. And God is kind of, it's an interesting end of the book, Because we like to think about Jonah, because we heard about Jonah and the fish when we were little. And what is this? Is a story that we heard of a man of trust. Because he had this awful experience, and he's in a yucky, slimy fish, and it throws up, and he lives, and he's a man of God. Yay, thank you. Let's think about Jonah and the big fish. Now let's have a prayer and sing a hymn, kids go to sleep, But the real deal is, Jonah's kind of a schmuck, right? He's selfish in the beginning of the book and doesn't want these people to come to faith, and he's selfish at the end of the book. And God has to say, stop it.
Yeah, but wasn't it in the first part of Jonah too, when he wanted to throw him, he was telling the sailors to throw him overboard?
It's my fault. He got that part.
And he wanted to save the sailors?
Yeah. So there's some, can it happen in the life of a believer in God that there's ups and downs? Where he looks like a schnook and sometimes he's pretty much trusted. So then you read his prayer, right? You check, that's a nice prayer. And there I'm thinking, Jonah, I like what you're doing here, and then you're a man of God. Good for you. Praying to God and recognizing your source of strength and rescue. And then he goes and does what God wants him to do in chapter 3. Good for you, Jonah. You may have been unwilling, but now you're carrying out in tough circumstances. It wasn't easy walking through this big city, and these are strangers, and you're probably not only, anti these people, but you're also scared. But you did it. Good for you, chapter 2. Good for you, chapter 3. Not so good, chapter 4. But that would never happen for me. I would always be consistent in my life with God, and I would have nothing that God would look at me and say, you did that again, really? And so the amazing God we have, dealing with people like Jonah, dealing with people like me and like him, that really, and he would let me live in his world and still learn from a guy like this. Maybe I need to be a little more mission-minded too. Maybe I need to look at my checkbook and say, there's a little more offering to the Lord might be okay to help Grace send its money onto the Senate, and that maybe voting for the budget would be important that way. 20% of all of my offerings and yours go out the door. Wouldn't it be cool if we could do more? You know, that'd be awesome.
Is there also a story in the New Testament that mirrors this, where there's a vine that is there one day and gone the next?
Well, the only one I can think of is when Jesus had his, a tough day on Monday of Holy Week, you know. I call it Angry Monday. That's what I'm thinking of anyway. Are you thinking of that one? You know, where
the fig tree.
The fig tree, right. He's going to have breakfast and there's no figs, it just looks good. And so, you know, you can imagine the disciples, you know, it's about 6:37 in the morning, 7:30. They're heading from, you know, the 2-mile walk into Jerusalem. And they get to the top of the ridge where they go down the switchbacks on the Mount of Olives, and here's this fig tree, and it's breakfast time, and there's no figs. So, you know, they're walking along, and Jesus turns to the fig tree, "Curse be, you fig tree!" And you can just imagine, you know, Peter, James, John, you know, Nathaniel, Simon the Zealot, they're all going, "Jeez, got up on the wrong side of Ben today, didn't we?" You know, they kind of.
Is that? I always looked at that a little deeper and said, you know, Jesus wouldn't just get caught off guard and have a bad moment.
Well, sure. Because what happened later in the day? On that same day. Because he goes in and he overturns the table and all kinds of angry money. He's angry, getting rid of these money changers. He did that 3 years earlier. Now he's doing it again. But now on the way home, now they see the tree and it's withered. And now what does he say? Troy, because you're on.
I mean, you can, if you have faith, you can move on.
That's Tuesday. But this one he uses, he looks at this withered fig tree and he says, see, don't be that tree, which is like the Pharisees. They look good on the outside, they got nothing on the inside. This fig tree looked good and there were no figs. He says, don't be like the Pharisees. That's what he uses it as a teaching tool.
Right, that's what I always got.
But right away in the morning, you know, they don't get the teaching moment until later at night when they're on the way home and the thing is dried out. See, then look at it and they go, whoa, there, he was really. So then he uses it as a visual aid.
It follows with everything he was saying about a good tree bears good fruit, and
yeah, well,
if a tree does not bear fruit, it will be cut down.
Sure. But that could tie into what he said there in Matthew 7. But I think this is more a specific teaching tool. He wanted the disciples to get this sense: don't fool around with what's on the inside. That's what counts the most. Your outside, yeah, it'll flow from that. You just can't put on a show and pretend, because God knows what's going on in there, which is really the lesson for this cursed fig tree. Thank you, Kathy. That was the Jonah vine help a little bit with understanding that, you know, he's upset about little things. And what about the big things? You know, is it true that in our life together as Christians, like say in a Christian congregation, we should pay attention to the little things? I mean, is that true? We should pay attention to the little things, don't you think? The little line items in the budget, the little fuzzies on the carpet that haven't been picked up, or the hymnals being straight to the pew, or the, you know, how we do things, and you know how the music is played. Or we should pay attention to little things, I think, and how we greet guests, and whether we do that or not, you know, and pay attention to that. What's the temperature of the building, and all these. We should shovel the sidewalks, I guess, right? Yeah, well, we should do a little, but it's the big thing that counts the most, the message. But you know, sometimes if you're thinking only about the big thing, we got to get this love of Jesus, and then you don't take care of the little things. That's not. And sometimes when all you do is care about the little things and you forget the big message, that's not so good either. The little things are going to serve the big thing. I'm getting off track. But
look at it this way, lots and lots of little things
yeah,
end up to one big thing.
yeah, lots of little things. If you don't do them well, but they do add up to a big. Was that kind of? Doesn't it give you a little bit of the creepies, you know, with them marching like an army, right? Isn't that chapter 2? Is that where I am? Yeah. In the middle of chapter 2, this army that comes out, verse 3,
Before them a fire devours, you know. What was looking like the Garden of Eden becomes a desert waste. Verse 4, they have the appearance of horses. They gallop like cavalry with a noise like that of chariots. They leap over mountaintops, crackling fire. You know, imagine if there is a locust swarm that's 3 miles wide and 10 miles long. You know, there's this buzz, there's this sound. You can just, it's just like this description, don't you think? And verse 7, they are like warriors. They scale the walls like soldiers. They march in lines, not swerving from their course. They don't jostle each other. Each marches straight ahead. They plunge through defenses without breaking ranks. They rush upon the city. They run along the wall. They climb into the houses. You know, it's just, it's pretty vivid how creepy that would be, huh? You ever get caught in a big bug mess or something? Or?
On the Mississippi River, when it's made like mating time or something like that, it gets.
Like river flies or what? Or what's
Mayflies, I
They're
think.
called
Yeah.
mayflies, they don't come out in May.
They don't come out in May. When do they come out?
I think it's
Normally August, it's hot, like
Yeah.
the first really hot, humid
Oh, is that-
night.
coat the everything.
I mean,
I think
literally,
that's
in
just
lacrosse, they would use
scoop
snow
them
plows
up.
and play, in a
Really?
in a really heavy hatch, you
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
a snow plow on the bridges. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just so, yeah, that's
Like
never in the
one
tourist,
outside.
Yeah.
you know, it's not in the visitor bureau.
It's not the
like,
visitor bureau stuff about the mayflies in
mayfly
August,
hatch,
yeah,
yeah,
right.
because it just, I was
Yeah.
playing softball one night when they hatch, and you just.
And then you just,
And the
You-
locals are like,
game is
"Yeah,
over."
no big deal, but
Yeah.
anyone else that's not.
But
used to
it's
you're
like
"Oh."
hours, it's just like billions of them hatch.
And then-
they mate, and they die.
Mhm.
and then it's a mess to clean them up.
Yeah.
That's clear about it.
Yeah.
I guess I had never known that.
Yeah.
Is it just a lacrosse thing or along the river
It's
anywhere?
along the river, but
I was
lacrosse seems to be
near
a center.
Cross area one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Doesn't it make you wonder why that is? Why lacrosse would have more than, you know, not Hudson, but lacrosse, you know.
Yeah.
My folks started in ministry in South Dakota, and there was a parsonage built, nice small little home, you know, for the pet. And so then they had to spray before occupancy the garage and close the door, and the next morning then you shovel out the crickets, like those flies. You know, the crickets would be. You've had that in your when a cricket gets in and you can hear them chirping like that, and then if you move there. You have these big wooden wardrobes where you hang your clothes. They're probably on the bottom of that. You know, you got to get your clothes out and dump it upside down. Get the cricket, and he jumps along the side of the wall. You know what I'm talking about, right? In your basement, right? Hiding behind the dehumidifier.
I had carpenter ants in the basement.
Oh, no!
Atlanta.
Really?
You could hear them chewing the wood.
That's like, is that worse than termites? The same.
They're faster than termites.
Faster. Carpenter ants.
But they were
Are those the big
eating-
black ones?
Yeah.
Hey.
So I started pulling the insulation out of the basement ceiling, and it was just raining ants.
Oh no.
And I got a shop vac in there, and built half a shop vac with ants. So,
That's just, yeah.
it's like,
Yeah. Locust plague makes you think of, you know, I said all these,
Exactly.
yeah, bugs. So then I'm thinking too about the plagues that God sent on the Egyptians. You know, because locusts were part of it. There's other stuff, river to blood, and lice and flies and frogs. You know, the frogs. And, oh, you know, just how odd. It's just you think about that.
We had an ant invasion in lacrosse.
That's right.
Remember, I got
We had a lot
home,
of bugs.
I got home from work one night after working second shift. He was already in bed, and I walk in the house. The floor is covered,
No.
black with ants. The whole house.
No way.
I wake him up. I'm like, "What's going on?" And we're trying to.
Yeah.
And it was just like they were
It was
passing
like an
through.
army passed through.
And by morning, they were gone.
That's
It
crazy.
was
It was just, it was
Yeah.
crazy, but they were everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just crazy.
Pastor Bondo said that this last spring, the kids are gonna run cross country and it's wet. Remember the rainy spring we had in
Yeah.
2018? And they go out to some Waukesha park, you know, and the grade school kids are gonna, and you know, then there's mosquitoes. Like, you're just covered, you're just everywhere. If you don't, you know, it's just, you're gonna get nailed with mosquito. They're all over your face and your arms. And then as he was watching the end of a race, sure enough, he noticed there was a ground wasps nest that somebody had stepped on, and out they came, you know, and some kids got stung, and I mean, just, so when you're thinking about bugs, Joel, you know, look, it's like, ew. But that would have been something that God's intent was to wake these people up. That was what he used to wake them up. Whoa, get their attention. Yeah, vivid stuff that we experience, and it kind of relates a little bit more. Good, everybody? Yes? Anything more? Well, if you're, we can take our break. How's that? And then enjoy the introduction. I have a little video clip that I hope comes through the sound of the, I don't know if the speaker's on. We'll try that. See how that works when we get there. Lynn and Troy, are you the host and hostess here? Thank you very much. I thought we had speakers on this cart.
No, got Skittles for you.
Whatever happened to those speakers?
This is what like about yellow.
That's the headwater. I don't know if there's a name for that. I'd have to look at some other maps I have to see if there's. What was I going to look for, Kathy?
Greeks. The reference is that
The reason we had Greeks.
See what that says.
Just singing over there, Joe.
I'm humming along here.
To the song in your heart.
You're coming Saturday, right?
Yes.
Obviously, you are.
Yes, he is.
Choice.
Wow.
There we go. See where I'm going with that.
visited pastor that wanted, whatever.
Latest on the what?
Remember about a year ago, there was a visited pastor that wanted to come over and be a pastor with us?
Oh, yeah.
How did that-
Was that about a year ago when I visited with the? Yeah, he, a fine man, he's a member of a Wells church, but his mother, he's single, and his mother is ill, and he's caring for her.
Okay.
And not ready to present himself to, first would go to the seminary for a year, and then he'd be ready to
Right, so he
be.
didn't even get to do that.
Well, he's chosen not to take the next step.
Okay.
He's happily being a lay member in a Wells church there, helping out.
So
his-
he left Missouri
He
State
did,
Church.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And then we have the, pretzels.
Well, you uncover that, there's a nice smell in this room, I'll tell you. Thank you, Lynn and Troy. So everybody who's watching online can just get their salivate as the meatball smell is pervading the room, so it's the advantage we have together.
How many pretzels do you have?
So Kathy, I took a look and
Okay.
I know that Lynn and Troy are gonna be loading up their plates and stuff, but if you wanted, you could take a look in Genesis chapter 10, after the flood. So when I looked in the Hebrew, this was an interesting connection. Genesis chapter 10, we have what's known as the Table of Nations. Remember, Noah had 3 boys, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, correct? Yes? And their wives, and then Noah and his wife, and there's 8 people on the ark, that we knew. So after the flood, then from these 3 boys and their wives will come us, the whole world, the nations. And what chapter 10 does is give us this record from God that it actually is repopulating the globe is what God's interested in us seeing. Chapter 11 tells us how the repopulation then became global by the language change, but 10, that's why they spread all over. Chapter 11, Tower of Babel, but chapter 10, Table of Nations. And if you're looking with me at the beginning of chapter 10 in Genesis, if you happen to see it, this is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons. And so the Japhethites, see, the sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tiras. Do you see that? And look at the 4th one. Javan. See that? Now go to verse 4. The sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish. Tarshish is often an Old Testament word referring to islands that get close to or the place of Spain, west end of the Mediterranean. The Kittim, the Kittites, and the Rodanites, from these the maritime people spread out into their territories by their clans within their nations, each with its own language. So there's geographic, ethnic, political, and linguistic changes. Now, there have been people in the past who made the mistake of trying to identify the descendants of Japheth and Ham and Shem in different cultural categories, saying mistakenly that all of the Japhethite peoples are the Caucasians and Indo-Europeans, and the Hamites are African American, and the Semites are Middle Eastern, including the Jews. That is not fair and not correct. That some of Ham's descendants ended in the continent of Africa is undeniable. That some of Shem's descendants are indeed the Semitic peoples and the Hebrews, yes. And that some of the Japheth descendants are scattered around the Mediterranean, we would acknowledge that, but to exclusively say that their skin colors are determined somehow by God, that's not right and not fair. We can't say that. But here's the interesting connection. When that word Javan comes up in Hebrew, it's the J is an I, and there is some vowel and consonant connection with Ionians, and so it's not, you can't prove it 100%, but there's a lot of connections with those in the islands around Greece. So when we're reading in Joel of the Greeks, that actually is the sons of Javan in Hebrew. I just looked it up in Hebrew. So the assumption is that Javan's descendants would be perhaps settling in the Mediterranean, maybe in the islands around Greece, and that's why some Bible translators, quite a number actually, suggest that the sons of Javan might well easily be translated Greeks. There's nothing sinful about saying that.
If you keep going further down that line, you hit Assyria and Nineveh.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, there are, yeah. So there are you, where are you now in the?
Verse
Like
11.
11.
Yeah, from the Hamites, right?
From the Hamites, yeah.
Sure. So that's more Middle Eastern than it is African American. So you can't pin, one race or skin tone or whatever. But you get Canaan was the father, right? And the Hivites, Jebusites. This is verse 15, 16, 17. So we can see those. See the Ham problem in seeing his father's nakedness right after Noah got drunk, and then the curse was not on Ham but on Canaan. And I'm pretty convinced that the curse has to do with a tendency to be sexual sin oriented, and that was the Canaanites. They were that for sure. But then we do see in verse 25 the Semites, from Shem, right? We do have that the two sons born to Eber, right? One is Peleg. These are names that are listed in the ancestors of Christ. These are the ones that lead up to Noah. From Noah down to Terah and Abraham. The Eber, you can see the Hebrew word in there, Hebrews, descendants of Eber. There is a bit of a connection there, so we acknowledge that. So the Hebrews are Semitic in that sense. But thanks for asking about that. I had to go look at what the Old Testament, what the Hebrew said. Literally, sons of Javan, translated Greeks. Okay, how about we do our introduction to the next two Bible books, Amos and Hosea. I didn't have anything in particular unless you felt like I'm talking about questions that I had in pages 1, 9, 10, 11. They're fairly self-understood, so I'm not going to spend time with those. You're all right? So in the PowerPoint, I'm going to zip through those rather quickly because we did discuss some of that. So let's see if this actually works. And I have to see if my volume, I don't even know if the volume will work and you'll be able to hear this, but we'll take a run at it here. Wait, okay, that's that. Well, sound. Okay, let's see what happens. I may have to do something with my mouse here in the Amos thing. No, that didn't help, did it? Well, I'm not using my own laptop. I'm using the church laptop, and this should. I don't know how to get that to be. I think technologically, I should have tried this a different way. We may not be able to watch it. Did that advance it? No, not there. Try this one more time. Well, it didn't come up. There's supposed to be one of those little YouTube arrows in the middle of this screen. And I don't know, because this is not mine, this is the church laptop. There's an interesting little video, some of you have seen this before, on a YouTube channel where there's, you hear a voice and they're describing with artwork how the book is laid out. And it's a 7-minute thing, it would take some of our time, but I'll maybe figure it out, or I can't hook my laptop into this camera setup, so that's why we're using the church laptop. So sorry about that.
The YouTube website right there? No.
No, there's supposed to be an arrow in the middle of this, and I don't know how to do that.
That's to watch our website.
I wonder if
That's the website.
if I go back, that's not showing up here either for you, right? No, that's not doing it.
If you went to the YouTube website, you could search for that.
Yeah, I probably could, but I'd have to find what it is, and I don't know if I have that. Sorry.
I'm just going to the internet.
I probably ruined our taping right now, but all right. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. And we'll advance it like this. Okay, so let's fill in our scorecard, and I didn't check with Pastor Bondo exactly how to do that off the church laptop. But anyway, so the author, if you have your Bible here, let's open up the book of Amos. It's pretty obvious what we've got. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, Joel, Amos. Hosea, Joel, Amos. Amos. Bunches have heard these stories, so you know this, but Amos is the author, and we have that right in the beginning, the word of the Lord. The words of Amos, one of the shepherds of Tekoa, what he saw concerning Israel 2 years before the earthquake. And then we have the time frame. Uzziah happens to be the 10th king of the north, was king in Judah, and Jeroboam II actually is the 14th king in the line of the kings of the north. Uzziah is in the south and Jeroboam in the north. Did I misspeak? Uzziah is in the south and Jeroboam is in the north. So there are 20 kings on each side, at least in my counting. And so we have a date reference here. That helps us then to peg this around 760 BC for Amos. Yes? Okay. And then this is in the north, based on what he has to say and to whom he's speaking. Amos and Hosea, especially Amos, speaking to the kings and the people of the northern part of Israel. Remember, the northern half deteriorated more rapidly than the south. So King Solomon, Civil War, 931. North is destroyed, 720. We have 200 years of deterioration. Another 150 years to go by before the south gets attacked by Babylon. But the north is 200 years faster than the south. And we're getting near the end. So 760, we only got about 40 years to go. So this is some of God's last appeal from a man named Amos. And if you see in the beginning verses there, he's one of the shepherds of Tekoa. And do we have it on our map on page?
108, yeah.
Is it there?
No, that's book here.
Is it in on page 119?
Spelling is more.
Right at the very center of 108.
Yeah, the map is the same, 108 and 119.
The spelling is different.
Yeah.
Tokia, Tekoa?
Yeah, I think that's a typo.
Okay.
I got this website that I pulled that map off of. The Bible says Tekoa. So it's south of Jerusalem, near the Bethlehem area, actually. So he's a shepherd. Well, now notice that the village is down south, right? And he's going to go to the north. So this is not an easy thing if you're not from there. So he is a missionary going to relatives, because it's still part of the nation of Israel, but they have been split now for almost 200 years, and they're at odds with each other. And the people up north, under the king's terrible leadership, are really in bad shape spiritually. It's just awful. But so God sends to them a messenger from the south, and this is what makes Amos unusual. Bless you. That's my job. That's what I do. So he's not only coming from the south, he's a foreigner, right? But then look how he's identified. What is his? He's not a professionally, theologically trained seminary graduate with his master's degree, doctorate in ministry, right? He's a shepherd. So what do you know about shepherds? Especially in the ancient world. What do you know about shepherds, Jeff?
Maybe uncouth.
Uncouth. Good word.
They
What?
smell like sheep?
They smell like sheep. They smell like sheep. They are uncouth. And yeah, keep going. Shepherds.
Farmers.
Farmers. Tell me more.
Uneducated.
Uneducated. Tell me more. You're on it. This is exactly right. Uneducated, uncouth, farmers, right? Smelly, right? So you can see them in their robes, right? This is not just out of the cleaners. You know, they didn't just pick this up and it's starched. There, right? No, we've got scruffiness and scraggly, and there's a hole in the elbows, right? And the seat of their robe is a little, right? And threads are hanging off the edges from their sleeves, and there's a little sheep dip crusted on the bottom edge, you know, right? Don't you? And it's like, ew, you know, and there's maybe a couple of teeth are missing. Aren't you thinking, you know? Right? You know, and he's got, I know there's bearded people here, so God bless you, you know, but this is not kempt, you know what I mean? Kind of sticking out, and his hair is here and there, and maybe he's got a lice problem, who knows, right? He's itching, he's scratching, you know, right? And his vocabulary is not, well, you know, he didn't go to school, you know, he knows what he knows, you know, he's a practical guy, right? And he's got, you know, what does he sound like? An orator, right? What does he sound like? What does a shepherd sound like? What do you think he's going to sound like? He's going to stand up, he's going to proclaim, right? He's going to sound like?
God's not happy with you.
Dear people of God, you have been unfaithful to the Lord. Things like that? Shepherd? No, what is he going to sound like?
You better shake up.
Judy, what's he going to sound like? Does it sound like a redneck?
It's going to sound like Stanley Kowalski.
The Lord sent me up here. I just came for the sheep. They're going to be out there hungry and everything, and I got to leave. They're going to come and talk to you.
Sounds like a pirate.
Well, the Lord sent me, so I got something to say. Right? What do you mean I stink? Come on. You stink. You know, you stink in the nostrils of God. He says you smell with your sin. Well, you think I'm smelling? You're smelling. Right? And where does he go? Where does he go? He's gonna go to the capital city up north. This is the Jerusalem. It's not Jerusalem. You know, it's up there. It's Samaria. And what does the city of Samaria look like? The capital city. What's the capital city look like? Do you think? What is the capital city? What's the capital city going to look like? Huts? Tents?
No.
No. What's it going to look like?
Big buildings.
It's got the building.
Elaborate.
Yeah. Right? Elaborate. And then you get into the palace of the king, and he's sitting on the floor. No, he's got his throne, right? And it's gilded, right? And there's marble columns. And he's got his fine purple robe on, right? And he's got servants. And what are they doing next to him? Palms, right? Like that. You need another grape? You know? We got the maid servants coming around. It's time for the dance show. You got whatever, you know. And you got the nobles standing. You got the sword with a sword, right? You got the big like standing attention, you know. They got everything's lined up like it should be, and right, and it's clean and everything. And he's served his lamb chops on a special platter, and he's got his wine goblet, and he's rings on his fingers, right? Just got the mani-pedi done because he's the king, right? And he's got everything trimmed up and looking nice. Things are going, you know. I've got my act together. I'm the king, and the door bursts open, right? And in trudges into the water. Here comes Amos, right? He's leaving a trail, you know. You know, 'cause he's got, you know, whatever was on his shoe is coming in, you know. And then he stands there in front of him with his couple of teeth, you know. Where are you sinners? You stink in God's eyes and his nose. God's gonna come with judgment. That's what I'm telling you, because I'm a messenger of God. Amos the farmer, you know, it's just, this is hilarious, but it's not so funny when you read what he has to say, because this is past news, right? So this is Amos, and just have that, Jeff, yeah.
So was it confusing to Israel that Jesus was described as a good shepherd? When that was the picture of a shepherd?
Yeah, you know, because I think the shepherds of Bethlehem were pretty scruffy too. But you got to figure when that picture, he says, I'm the good shepherd. You know, I think they can catch that. Because you don't look like much. But boy, do you care for your sheep. I mean, that's the point there.
Okay.
I don't know if I answered it.
Sure.
Because when we get the paintings on the wall of Jesus the Good Shepherd, he's looking pretty sharp.
Yeah.
You know, there's no baby lamb puke on his sleeve, right? Sorry, I mean that's just, you know, he doesn't look like that.
Jesus was a shepherd of people.
Yeah.
As opposed to
So
Shepherd turned into the best king, David.
yeah, that in fact God wanted the kings to be spiritual shepherds of the people. And maybe that would help us to understand that his analogy, he's the good shepherd like the kings should have been. You know, caring. The kings were all supposed to be spiritual shepherds. But it does make you wonder a little bit because, you know, shepherds were uneducated. They were looked down on, kind of. They were just stay up all night and care for the sheep. But, there were shepherds who did their work and did their job. And I'm just picturing what Amos must have looked like, you know. Thanks. Okay, so Amos, and then if you have your notebook, the outline is he's coming with a message of harsh judgment, you see. This is what, so what comes to mind, what picture or imagery when you hear the word Obadiah? Obadiah, first thing. Yeah, that doom for Edom, and then you have that cliff, you know, the sea going through where you have that treasury, like the Temple of Doom, the Indiana Jones. That's Obadiah, right? Doom for Edom. And what comes to mind as soon as you hear Joel? The first thing, the locust, right? And what comes to mind the first thing you hear? Jonah. This unwilling missionary, right? In the fish thing and the whole Jonah slap him on the side. I mean, that comes to your head right away, see? So what comes to your mind now? Amos. The first thing that's going to come to your mind now, from now on, I hope, right? You think Amos, you're thinking of this scruffy shepherd who's going to go in the palace of the north and yell at him. I mean, it's harsh. It's just, he's not mincing any words. This is what's happening. So how does God have Amos function? Well, I like to work with outlines, and this is how I operate through the book. There are 8 messages of judgment in the first chapters. And it's interesting when he's taken shots through Amos, and Amos is preaching, you see, you've got the king of the north sitting there listening to this, okay, what do you got to say? And then he starts hammering God through Amos on all the nations, and the king of the north is probably going, yeah, the Philistines, yeah, get rid of those, and Edomites, yeah, get rid of them, you know. But then he's circling in, and then boom, then he nails the north. So when your Bible is open, yes? Are you with me? So look at chapter 1, judgment on Israel's neighbors, and you get to verse 3. For three sins of Damascus, the capital of Syria, right? And then that's the Syrians. And then in verse 6, for 3 sins of Gaza, even for 4. That's Hebrew building. That's the way they build it. For 3 sins and even for 4. You know, I've not turned back my wrath against them. Gaza is the Gaza Strip. Tel Aviv. That's where the Philistines lived along the Mediterranean. And then you get to verse 9. For 3 sins of Tyre, even for 4. And now you're up north on the coast. That's Lebanon. Right? And now we get the Edom thing in verse 11. So you get Syria, the Philistines, the Phoenicians up in Lebanon. You've got the Edomites, And then in verse 13, we're going to cross the Jordan River to the Ammonites. Do you see that? See where we're going? And then I'm in chapter 2 for 3 sons of Moab. Now the east side of Jordan, south of Moab, along the Dead Sea. And then we're even to go to the nation down south, your cousins. Chapter 2, verse 4 for 3 sons of Judah, even for 4. So what's happening is the king of the north is listening to Amos, and God's saying, I'm going to bring judgment on all these nations all around. He's circling all around, circling. And he gets up to Judah, and now, who gets the most print? Starting in verse 6 all the way to the end of the chapter. And this is what I'm going to do to you, as he's talking to the king of the north. He could smugly listen to the first part, and then all of a sudden, now, wait a minute, I got the problem here. This is fascinating to me. And then, in the outline again on page 113, we have 4 sermons of judgment about Israel's depravity and stubbornness and so on. And then there's visions, starting in chapter 7, which I think I have a little PowerPoint thing here for you, because there's Amos in this time frame. Okay, consider this scene. He's a farmer from the south, right, with his sheep, and then he's going to be in the palaces of the north. Okay, we talked about that, spewing these threats. So 8 messages. So Amos zeroes in on the north. So this is, I got the map here for you. So this is what I just did with you in your Bible. You know, up north, down there, north, southwest, northeast, way south, then the east, and Judah, and finally, kaboom. See, zoom. That's what's happening with those messages. But now, these sermons of judgment and 5 visions, the vivid imagery. So he talks about, again, like Joel, a locust plague. The threat of God against these people. And this is what's going to happen. You get your act together, because I'm coming with that. And then drought. Horrible pictures of drought. And then the plumb line. You guys, all know what a plumb line is, huh? Can you describe it? What's a plumb line?
It's just a line with a weight on the end that you can hang in, so you know perfectly straight up and down.
Yeah, and then you snap it, and then the chalk gets on.
If you
do it that way, or whatever, you can see straight. So I am going to measure you and find that, Israel, you are crooked, because my plumb line is straight. I want this, and you're all over the man. You're crooked, is what he's saying. And then a basket of fruit, ripe fruit, will be, it's a play on words actually. The word for fruit is kayets. And the word for the end is kates. So he's playing on words, a little pareidomasia, a little pun actually. You're going to be like a basket of ripe fruit. You're coming to the end, my judgment end. Kayets and kates. So that's, I don't know, come out in English, but kayets and kates. Something like that you can think of. So the consonants line up in the Hebrew language, and then they have just different vowels that this is related. I got a basket that's going to be devoured, so are you going to come to your end. You're like ripe fruit. This is the imagery and there's something interesting about that smashing the altar. Another picture, it could be destruction of your idol worship. And then you can read this book in 15 minutes. But I don't want to miss that. At the end of the book, there is a little message of hope, which is interesting to me. So you have 9 chapters. In the middle of chapter 9, verse 11 to 15, is all this woe, all this destruction, all this threat, all this judgment. But then God says, as the temple that you worship idols will be destroyed, but then I'm going to build my temple, where my king, the Savior God will live, and that will be flourishing, and that will be all happy. And this is the house of David, and this is a promise of the Savior. It's really cool at the end of the book. The people who don't believe the Bible's true and the message of God think, well, that can't be written by Amos, because the whole book is all bad news. And if there's good news at the end, it was probably appended later by Hebrew scholars just to make it a happy ending. Duh. Would not be a message of law and gospel? Predominant law because they need it, and then, that's really what this is. Okay, that's that. Then I have the message of Hosea. We'll do this real quickly too. So Hosea, no video, but he's the author. And that is the first of the minor prophets, so that you gotta go backwards. Hosea, Joel, Amos, Hosea. There's 14 chapters, it's still not a very big book. And the timing is real close, 740. You know, we're getting a little closer to the end of the north. But I see Hosea preaching like to the whole nation, a lot to the north, mostly to the north. But the whole nation is, especially the north. And then, so that's why I put, where is he preaching? This is, you know, getting to the final warnings before the destruction of the Assyrians because they didn't listen to Amos or Hosea. But God is still in his love, calling out to them. The story of Hosea, so now, you know, Obadiah, the doom for Edom, and the cliff, and the, you know, right? And then we have Joel, the locust, and Jonah with the unwilling missionary and the fish, and we got Amos, the farmer, right? But Hosea, the big deal here, the picture here is spiritual adultery. So, like you'd want to have this beautiful picture, husband and wife. God is the husband and the Israelites are the bride. It's New Testament imagery too. Jesus is the groom and we are the bride. And this is what's happening here. God tells Hosea to act out his faithful love to unfaithful Israel. So he tells Hosea to marry a prostitute, or at least if she wasn't at first, she becomes that, and then to take her back. And that is just like unconscionable. That's what Hosea lives out. His wife's name is Gomer. I just think that's kind of interesting. Shazam! You know, that's my first thought. Sergeant Carter.
A lot of the old names are coming back. But I'm thinking that one's not.
That's not coming back. I don't think, not for, yeah. And then, the children they had, Lo Ami, Lo Ruhamah, you know, I don't think those names are coming back. Not my people, not loved. So that's the picture. So there he fits in the timeline. The Lord's faithful love for unfaithful people. The major imagery is spiritual adultery. So you have this imagery in your head of this Israelite woman who's going to actually flaunt herself and give herself away to other men. And God says to Hosea, go marry her again and bring her back. Because that's what that's my love to these unfaithful Israelites. That's really the imagery. And it's really a difficult book, I think, to outline. I have my own way of doing it, and you don't have to worry about that. You can just read through the book, and you'll get a lot from this powerful message from Hosea. I have an outline on page 114 in the way I've looked at it at different times. The opening 3 sections have to do with the Lord's dealing with them as a family in anger and in love. And then here is a call to them to learn and to love and to be loyal and to listen. There's powerful stuff. One thing interesting I wanted to point out for you is on page 115 of your notebook. Each of these does have some phrases that, you know, so Amos the shepherd, he's got all harsh judgment with a little good stuff on the end, and then the spiritual adultery from Hosea. The passages that stick out are the last part of Amos and Hosea. He's injured us, but he will bind us up. And I desire mercy, not sacrifice. But then those are just some New Testament references I find fascinating. So in Hosea chapter 11, you have this passage that is quoted. Can you turn to chapter 11? And then we're going to wrap up here tonight. In Hosea. Give you a little heads up in your reading. Chapter 11, Hosea. Jacob, you got that? You want to read that for us, please?
Yeah. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son.
That last phrase, right there. Out of Egypt I have called my son. Guess what? That line from Hosea is quoted in Matthew chapter 2. Herod is going to kill the babies of Bethlehem. The angel comes and Joseph takes the family to Egypt, right? And then it says that the angel appeared to Joseph, come on back, because Herod is dead. And then here it is, out of Egypt I called my son. This little line we find out in the New Testament is actually, this is a little line about the Savior, pictured in advance. Who knew? Yeah.
But it also has does it also have the dual meaning?
Yes, the dual.
Like called Israel out of
He did,
Egypt?
exactly. Yeah. It has to do, that's the nature of some prophecy like that. You see both. You see what he did for Israel, calling them literally out of Egypt, right? But he also did it for his son. It's kind of an interesting quote in the New Testament. There's another one that you might recognize. It's in Hosea chapter 13, verse 14. Do you see that one? Ken, do you have that one? You want to, verse 14?
I will deliver this people from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. Where, O death, is your plagues? Are your plagues? Where, O grave, is your destruction?
And there you can hear then later on echoes the Apostle Paul in his great resurrection chapter, 1 Corinthians 15. Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, the power of sin is the law. Thanks be to God, he gives us the victory. You know that? So there's echoes of Hosea in Paul's letter to the Corinthians in the resurrection chapter. Right? That's a fascinating little connection there for us. Okay, that would be your fun for this coming week. Not a very difficult thing. He's going to use the Assyrians. I had some stuff on the map up here to bring discipline on the people of Israel, their Assyrian territory. And that's what Hosea is talking about. Look out. Here come the Assyrians. And that's what did happen. But it takes about 15 and a half minutes to read this book. It's not, it might take you a little longer. You could go over it again more than once. But these are not long readings. So we'll have a chance to talk about those next week. Lots of stuff. Don't forget that on the pages that follow, page 1, 16, 17, I have some explanatory notes about places and references and people if that's helpful. Thank you, everybody. Stay warm. Have a good night. Hopefully we'll see you Saturday as we gather for some fun.
I don't think Troy can come.
Yeah, well.
I think he's busy.
Well, I'm picking him up, so he better be there.
Yeah, he's got a gig.
He's got a gig. He's got a gig. I hear you.
You want me to put the Bible thing?